Hello everyone and welcome to Inside Healthcare. The summer is turning out to be hotter than normal according to the National Weather Service, and doctors with the urgency room are seeing many patients this summer suffering from hydration, heat exhaustion, and heat stroke. But how do you know the difference between them, and when should you seek emergency medical care? With some answers, joining us, back with us again, is Dr. Carolyn McClain with the Urgency Room, Medical Director with the Urgency Room. So thank you for coming back. It's always a pleasure to have you with us.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
So, you know, you're out in the heat. I mean, how do you know the difference between heat exhaustion, dehydration, heat stroke?
So when you think about heat exhaustion and heat stroke, just as far as definitions, exhaustion is something you would much rather have than a stroke. So
really,
I think about it like
stroke sounds a lot more serious.
Yeah, so stroke is more serious because if you have heat exhaustion, it's something that you can come back from. But heat stroke, that means that you've actually done some significant damage to your brain, your organs, so it's much more serious. And actually, heat stroke, 1 in 5 people die. So
it's very serious.
It's a big deal. Heat exhaustion, we've probably all been there. We've been outside, we've been running around, we were playing the football game with the family and got really hot and tired, and that's more heat exhaustion.
Even if you're at the beach or the lake too, you can still get it.
Yeah. And most of us we have our body cues, so you feel hot, you feel like your heart is racing, you're breathing faster, and those are important triggers to get you to drink and get you to remember that, you know what, I need to find some shade, I need to, make sure I'm dressed appropriately, I need to find air conditioning. Listen to those triggers. So that's really important so you don't end up having heat stroke.
And then what would be signs of a heat stroke? Obviously, if you're having signs and symptoms, it's almost too late, right? You need to get help.
So by the time you have heat stroke, you won't be able to get yourself help because you're confused. So the number one sign of heat stroke is that people are confused because the first place that's affected by a high temperature is your brain functioning. So when you call your parents at home, when you're calling to check on them, make sure they're okay on a really hot day, if they sound confused, that's a key sign that you need to go check on them, make sure that they are okay, that they're not getting heat stroke.
I remember a few years back when Chicago had that prolonged heat, extreme heat, and they had a number of elderly people that they found that had died, and they were home alone and didn't get the help they needed.
Yeah, so what happens when you're older, you don't have the ability to dissipate heat in the same way. So as you get older, all of our vessels get a little harder. They don't dilate as well, and we can't get that nice flush that you see when somebody's really hot, they're really red. Well, as you get older, you're not able to do that, so you're not able to get rid of the heat. Plus, you're usually on a bunch of medicines. So you could be on a water pill, all the blood pressure medicines, so you don't have, if you're on a blood pressure medicine, you may not have that racing heartbeat saying, hey, something's wrong, triggering you to drink.
And people that are on these medications, are they at a higher risk for having a heat stroke?
Absolutely.
Or heat exhaustion?
Absolutely, yeah. And so for the older folks, if they're on any blood pressure medicines, water pills, even things like anticoagulants, so Plavix or warfarin, they're at greater risk for having heat stroke. And heat stroke, as we discussed, is really serious. I mean, 1 out of 5 people die from it. So you really have to watch it when you're older. And one thing you can do is just, I see this all the time at the urgency room, where people will bring in their parents and say, they're just not acting right. And you give them a liter of IV fluids, and they perk right up and they feel better.
So anything besides like staying out of the heat, but even if you don't have air conditioning, you're at home and you don't have a fan or something, what other things would you advise families and loved ones to do?
So if you are talking to someone who's older, you want to make sure that they're drinking cold fluids. And they have done some studies in that if you tell them to drink water, they're much less likely to drink than if you even get them to drink Crystal Light.
Really?
Or something with a flavor. They're just more driven to drink it because it tastes better. So if you tell, I see this all the time, kids will bring their their older parents in and say, Dad's not drinking and he just drinks coffee because he likes it. But that's dehydrating. So if you say, drink Crystal Light, drink Gatorade, drink something that tastes better, they're much more likely to do it, and they won't get in as much trouble.
I just thought about, too, like iced tea. I mean, tea has a lot of caffeine in it as well, so that could be dehydrating people, even though they think they're getting plenty of fluids.
So I've talked to people about doing, because you have a habit, and you will drink the coffee, you will drink the tea, so just get some decaffeinated and mix it up in there.
Okay. What about for other children are at a higher risk for these as well, or for at least heat exhaustion?
So, I mean, kids are wonderful in that they will play through anything, but they'll play through what you should stop. You should stop, you should drink. They don't have the ability to sweat as much, which is great because they don't have the problems with deodorant and all the things that we have to deal with, but they are unable to get rid of that heat. So they are much more likely to get heat exhaustion and heat stroke. And then right now we're coming up on football season, and that, you know, these kids, they work so hard out there. And when they're working that hard and they want to impress people, even if they're drinking enough, if it's 95 degrees and you're wearing all that equipment, you can get really, really sick.
I remember when my son was in football and he would come home so exhausted. I go, this can't be healthy for you. But, you know, like you said, he wants to do best and make the team and start and all that stuff. So other advice then for families looking out for their young ones or teenagers or older loved ones?
So, I mean, if you're going to send your kids out to play sports, this is the time when you're going back to school to play the sports. You want to make sure that they drink plenty. Give them Gatorade, give them something with some flavor in it so that they will drink it. Ask them to, if your child is on any of the ADD meds, that increases your risk for getting dehydrated and getting heat stroke or heat exhaustion. So you want to just really reinforce to them that they need to drink enough and take breaks. Coaches are great at this now. They know that they need to get the kids to take breaks, but the kids don't want to. So you have to just encourage your child to make sure that they drink enough, that they get into some shade, and that they're aware how important it is.
And you know, we have the state fair happening this month, and we have tens of thousands of people going there. What should they know, fairgoers, before they even go to the state fair?
So one of the major contributors to heat stroke and heat exhaustion is alcohol. And that is a wonderful part of the state fair, but the state fair is inevitably unbelievably hot and crowded, and then you are in closed spaces that are cramped, and so you're much more likely to get dehydrated. So just remind people, bring an extra bottle of water. If you have a beer, drink a bottle of water. You know, just make sure that you are staying on top of it. Dress appropriately, wear a hat, and whenever you can, if there's any shade, make sure you take a break and use that opportunity to cool off.
They always have that good lemonade stand there too as well. What about for the fried foods out there? Can that also contribute to this? I mean, they're salty and
no, but there's a lot of health issues with the food at the state fair. But, you know, it's important to enjoy yourself. Just do everything in moderation. Drink lots of fluids while you're there.
Final comments for our viewers.
So if you have a family member or a friend and you are at all concerned that they have heat stroke and they're confused, do not just give them water. Bring them to an emergency room, bring them to an ER. Make sure that they're seen, because it is a really dangerous illness, and if they're not taken care of the right way, they could have serious long-term complications.
And if you have any doubt, I would think bring them to the emergency as well for get that emergency care and stuff. Like maybe they just need an IV fluid and they'll be back to normal then.
It's truly amazing, especially with the elderly population. If you bring them in and they seem confused and you're concerned, they get some IV fluids and they're your dad again or grandpa again.
Great advice as always. So always a pleasure to have you with us, Dr. McClain.
Thank you.
Thank you.